We say, Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Mashiach Yahushai. We're glad that everybody is able to tune in again with us this week. We do apologize for not being on last couple of weeks, or last week, I should say, because the weather was so bad here in Houston, Texas, that it affected everyone. I mean, everyone is still trying to get back to some form of normality. Burst pipes, and the sad thing is that none of the stores where some of those UPVC pipes are, people can't get
CPVC pipes.
Yeah. Everything is empty, the cupboard is bare, and so people are still suffering to some degree because they're unable to get back to some form of normal life. So we ourselves, we suffer a bit of a problem here because some of our pipes in our water filtration unit busted, so that had to be fixed. So a number of things. So we do apologize. It was no fault of ours. We would gladly come and stand up and bring this truth to you, but because of the present circumstance, we were under that. In fact, there's a scripture that comes to mind. Let's just go there. It's in the book of Job. Job 38, I think it is. It's very interesting. It's Job 37. Job 37 and verse 13.
Come. The book of Job, chapter 37, verse 13. He causes it to come.
What's that? You see, the scripture here is telling us that the Most High causes things to come. The question is, there's a comma there, whatever that thing is happening to you, or you're going through, or you're dealing with, He causes it to come.
Come.
Go on.
Whether for correction.
So watch what it says. Whether it be for correction.
Come.
Some things happen to us because the Most High God is trying to correct us and get us back on track.
That's right.
Go on.
Or for His land.
Or for His land. Some would say, well, surely he's speaking about the land in Israel, Judea, where we are all from. Well, yes and no, but remember the land where we are right now, even though it has become spoiled and destroyed by those who occupy it, this land was a beautiful land in the beginning. When the northern kingdom was here, in the beginning it was a beautiful land, unspoiled, untarnished, but since another group of people has taken reign over this land has become spoiled. So it tells you clearly here, all for His land. And wherever His people are, and the scripture says, wherever the soles of your feet shall trod, that is where He's establishing for you to have ownership. So here, in this land, it has been destroyed, and ultimately has become Babylon. But read on.
Or for mercy.
So he says that there are some things that happen to us because of mercy, or because He's trying to get us, thank you very much, to get ourselves together. You see that? So here, let's read again right from the top of it, please.
Job chapter 37, verse 13. He causes it to come.
He causes what?
He causes it to come.
Go on.
Whether for correction.
Whether for what?
Whether for correction.
Go on.
Or for His land.
Or for His land.
Or for mercy.
Or for mercy.
Come.
He's making it very clear to us what He is doing. Come on. All right, well, the teaching we're going to deal with today, I think it's one that we overdo. It's called identity theft. Identity theft. Identity theft. If you were to give me a scripture, what scripture would come to your mind if you were to discuss the point of someone stealing another person's identity? What scripture would come to mind? I can think of several ones. Go ahead.
Revelation 2 and 9.
Revelations chapter 2 and 9. Let's go there. Revelations chapter 2 and 9. Let's read it.
The book of Revelation, chapter 2 and verse 9.
Read.
I know thy works.
Go on.
And tribulation.
Go on.
And poverty. But thou art rich.
He said, you are rich in spite of the fact that you've gone through tribulation and you have suffered poverty. Read on.
Come. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews.
Who say they are Jews. Hold that for a quick minute. Back to Daniel chapter 11, if you please, and read verse 14.
The book of Daniel, chapter 11, verse 14.
Read.
And in those times there shall many stand up against the king of the south.
Go on.
Also the robbers of thy people
Hold
shall
it. What did it say?
also the robbers of thy
The
people
robbers of thy people. Go on.
shall exalt themselves
Shall exalt themselves. Go on.
to establish the vision,
To establish the vision. You finished?
but they shall fall.
But they shall fall.
Come.
Those are the same people who have stolen another group of people's identity. Read it again from the top. Read it all the way through.
Daniel chapter 11, verse 14.
Read.
And in those times there shall many stand up against the king of the south.
Go on.
Also the robbers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision,
To establish the vision.
but they shall fall.
When the scripture says they shall fall. Let's go back to Revelation chapter 2 and verse 9.
Revelation chapter 2 and verse 9. I know thy works, and tribulation,
Read.
and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews,
But that what?
that say they are Jews,
Go on.
and are not,
And are not. Go on.
but are the synagogue of Satan.
But are the synagogue of Satan.
Come.
Since we're there, let's go to Revelation chapter 3 and 9. Let's get it all out there. Go ahead.
Revelation chapter 3 and verse 9. Behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan,
Go on.
which say they are Jews,
Which say, there's assuming that no one's going to find out the truth. They say they are Jews and what?
and are not,
And are not. Go on.
but do lie,
But do what?
but do lie.
Go on.
Behold, I will make them to come and worship before thy feet, and to know that I have loved thee.
That I have loved thee. Now, this is not going to be necessarily a long teaching, but it's going to be informative. So let's go to Genesis chapter 5. Let's go back to the beginning. And we're going to begin reading, if you please, verse 5 and verse 30. 5 and verse 32. Yes.
Come. The book of Genesis, chapter 5 and verse 32.
Read.
And Noah was 500 years old,
Go on.
and Noah begat Shem.
He begat who?
Noah begat Shem,
Go on.
Ham,
Go on.
and Japheth.
And Japheth. Now, we're going to focus primarily today on Japheth, or as it would be pronounced back in those days as Japhat.
Come.
Okay, so let's deal with him, but just jump over to chapter 6 and let's begin reading from verse 11.
Come. Genesis chapter 6 and verse 11.
Go on.
The earth also was corrupt before God.
It was what?
The earth also was corrupt before God.
So in the beginning, the earth was corrupt because there are three groups of people on the earth. I don't know of them teaching this in the regular Christian church, but there are three groups of people, and for those of you taking notes, let's just put them down so you have a reference point. They are all called sons. All of them are called sons. But they have different distinguishing qualities that identify what type of sons they are. The first, at the top of it, is the sons of power. Now, the sons of power is Israel. How do we know that? Go to Genesis chapter 34, 32, and 24, please.
The book of Genesis, chapter 32 and verse 24.
Go ahead.
And Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him,
Go
until the breaking of the day.
Until what?
Until the breaking of the day.
Until the breaking of the day. Jump to verse 28.
Come, verse 28. And he said, thy name shall be called no more Jacob,
Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but read,
but Israel.
but Israel. Now let's understand why.
For as a prince,
As a prince. Now the word prince, you must never leave it out. It means first. You're the first. Go on.
hast thou power with God.
So you are a son of the power of God. You are a son of power. So it says, thou a prince hast thou power with God. Go on.
Come, and with men.
And with men. So you have power with God and you have power with men.
Come.
It's speaking about all the men of the earth. Now, when you look at our history, you'll wonder, well, where did we have power with men? Well, we had brief instances, but never anything but any consistency. Why? Because we broke his laws, statutes, and commandments. Finish it, please.
And has prevailed.
And will prevail. So let's go back. So we see that deals with the sons of power, which is Israel. Now, the second group is the son of men. The son of men. That always refers to the nations. So the son of men refers to the nations. Those are the nations. When the scripture speaks about the daughters of men and so on, it's speaking about the nations. Come on. Let's prove that. Genesis chapter 6 and verse 4. Let's go.
The book of Genesis, chapter 6 and verse 4.
Let's read.
There were giants in the earth in those days.
Men of great stature. Now, when it uses that term, now, for some, don't get carried away with the Christianese version of this, which says that there were giants in the earth that were 50 foot tall. No. There were large men, and you must remember, by the way, that people were taller, people were bigger, different groups of people. Now, the Adamites, they were a more statuesque group of people. They were statued, tall men, men of stature. That's why that term is used oftentimes. To this very day, there's a group of people, a tribe over in Africa. They're the tallest people in Africa. Tall women, tall men, tall children. And they all, the shortest among them is 6'5". That's the shortest. The normal height is 7'2", 7'4". That's normal. It's incredible. And they are an African group of people. So that kind of shows you that when the scripture says, and there were giants, go on.
There were giants in the earth in those days.
Go on.
And also after that.
And after that. Now, when it says after that, meaning after the flood also. Now, all these other books that are saying that they had sex with angels and all of that nonsense, that's fable. That's men's fable. Or what they use the term as Jewish fable, which means a lie. But read on.
When the sons of God.
When what?
When the sons of God.
The sons of God, go on.
Came in unto the daughters of men.
See, there it is right there. Underline that. The daughters of men. The daughters of men. The daughters of the nations. Read on.
And they bare children to them.
Go on.
The same became mighty men, which were of old.
Which were of old, go on.
Of renown.
Of renown. Now, you will find that tied in with Jude 1 and 4. Okay? That's normally what we tie that in with. But we're not going down that road tonight, but this is what we're going to do. Let's go back. The third group of people that were on the earth were the sons of the wicked. Sons of the wicked. Now, the sons of the wicked refers to the sons of the serpent. Now, again, don't get it twisted. We're not talking about talking snakes and all of that business. The term snake is referred to a race or a group of people because they were cunning. They were into beguiling and fooling and taking and seducing people. So they were called snakes. The same way if someone did you a wrong, you'd call them a rat. But they lied, you said, you rat. It's that type of expression. You must remember as well, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, if you're listening to these teachings, you'll get to realize that the scriptures is made up of euphemisms and terminologies that our people to this very day use.
Right.
We still use those things. So when anyone tries to make out that some European people, that's hogwash. This is Israelite verbiage. This is the way we spoke, and we still speak like that to this very day. And when you go through every decade, you will hear expressions used. Going back, maybe say 20 or 30, they were calling anyone who did you wrong, you jive turkey. But there were expressions that were used because it's a commonality within the race of our people that we do that. Now, did you put this on script? All right, so let's give you something on the wicked, a scripture to prove that. Let's go to Genesis chapter 4 and 6, please.
The book of Genesis, chapter 4 and verse 6.
Go ahead.
And the Most High said unto Cain, Why art thou wroth? And why is thy countenance fallen?
Go on.
If thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted. And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door.
Sin lieth at the door. A decision is there for you to make. Go on.
Come, and unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him.
See that? So it's even given you the key to it all. I'm tempted to give you one more, but go to 1 John chapter 3 to give you a little bit more ammunition on that. 1 John chapter 3, begin reading at verse 11, and we'll stop at 12 because of time.
The book of 1 John, chapter 3, and verse 11, it reads, For this is the message that ye heard from the beginning.
Do me a favor, go to verse 9,
Come.
and then jump to 11.
1 John, chapter 3, and verse 9. Whosoever is born of God does not commit sin,
Go on.
for his seed remaineth in him.
Go on.
And he cannot sin because he is born of God.
Because he continues to keep the law, statutes, and commandments.
Come.
All right, jump to 11. Let's go.
Verse 11. For this is the message that ye heard from the beginning,
From the beginning, go on.
that we should love one another,
Go on.
not as Cain,
Not as who?
not as Cain,
Not as Cain, go on,
who was of that wicked one.
of the wicked one.
Come.
He was the son of the wicked son of the serpent. Come on? So you'll see that the scriptures are there to back all this up. Now that we've read that, let's go to 1 Chronicles, because I just want to establish that. But let's get into the meat and potatoes of this teaching. 1 Chronicles chapter 1, and we read at verse 4. 1 Chronicles chapter 1, and read verse 4.
The book of 1 Chronicles, chapter 1 and verse 4.
Read.
Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the sons of Japheth.
These are Noah, Shem, Ham, and who?
Japheth.
And Japheth. These are who? Can somebody tell me? Who are they? I mean, if you were struggling to put your hand up, then I'd have trouble with this. All right, so there we go. Go ahead, Sister Cleo.
Ham, Shem, and Japheth are the sons of Noah.
Are sons of Noah. Very good. All right, let's go on. Read verse 5.
Verse 5. The sons of Japheth, Gomer, Magog, Madai, and Javan, and Tubal, and Meshech, and Tyrus.
Notice, these are all the ancient names of many of the countries that still exist to this very day. These are the ancient names of them.
Come.
Now, let's read verse 6.
Verse 6. And the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, Riphtah, and Togarmah, the sons of Javan, Elisha, and Tarshish, Kittim, and Dagamit.
Now, all these again are countries that exist today. For instance, Kittim, they started out on an island. Today we call that we call it Cyprus. Cyprus. These people are the ones who ends up becoming down the road Romans. They become Romans. And those Romans that they become are the ones who again go on and take on other countries and steal identities. See that? So let me kind of slow my roll just a little bit. Let's go to Deuteronomy 32. Deuteronomy 32, and we have to read that because we have to establish the fact that the Most High God has not forgotten his people. So 32 and 8, please.
Come. The book of Deuteronomy, chapter 32 and verse 8. When the Most High divided to the nations.
He did what?
When the Most High divided to the nations.
So when you think the nations just went out there and took the land that they wanted to, that's quite wrong. The lands that they took and were in, it was because the Most High led them there.
Come.
They didn't know why, but the Most High led them there. So it says that when the Most High divided to the nations, their what?
Their inheritance.
Go on.
When he separated the sons of Adam.
So now he separates the sons of Adam. Go on.
He set the bounds of the people.
And he set boundaries for the people. Go on.
According to the number of the children of Israel.
According to the number of the children of Israel. Why did he do that? The next verse tells us. Read.
For the Most High's portion is his people.
So his portion is his people. And remember that Jacob or Israel is his firstborn. And as firstborn, they're entitled to double. Got that? All right. Let's read on.
Jacob is the lot of his inheritance.
Jacob is the lot of his inheritance. So whatever the father has, Jacob is going to inherit it because he's the son. Oh, I didn't know that. Don't teach that in Sunday school, go to church on Sunday. All right, go ahead.
Verse 10.
All right, so verse 10, let's leave that. What I want you to do now, let's prove certain things. Now, the book we're going to be reading from, it's the works of Josephus. In this book, it's usually it's signified by the antiquities of the Jews. Now, it's really a double-edged sword. And I always say to people, it is good to read, but it does have bones. Josephus, by the way, he was one of us. He was Jake. He was a Jew, but he sold himself out, and in so doing, sometimes some of the information he put in, he would kind of lean it a certain way. But for time purposes, we're going to go to the Mark 24, please. And we're going to read some excerpts, and then we're going to go backwards and forwards and so forth. All right, let's begin reading where it is marked at chapter 5. Yeah, chapter 5. Right, beginning at the top.
Come, chapter 5.
Please do make note.
It says, after what manner the prosperity of Noah sent out colonies and inhabited the whole earth.
Read it again.
After what manner the prosperity of Noah sent out colonies
Go on.
and inhabited the whole earth.
So Noah sent out colonies, meaning he sent out his sons. He kissed them, hugged them. He made sure that they're well provided for as much as he could for them to take on their journey. And he sent them out so that they could occupy the land. What you must understand, ladies and gentlemen, Noah was a black man. Contrary to the fact that they show these movies and always keep showing people white. White people didn't exist for quite some time, much later. But here, this is what Josephus is saying, that Noah sent out his sons to colonize. Read it again.
After what manner the prosperity of Noah sent out colonies and inhabited the whole earth.
See? So the real colonizers was us. But then when we read on, we say,
After this, they were dispersed abroad on account of their languages.
on account of what?
On account of their
On
languages.
account of their languages. Go on.
And went out by colonies everywhere.
Go on.
And each colony took possession of that land, which they, Salaki, which they light upon unto which God led them.
Now, God led them. See? The Most High led them. Now, bear this in mind as well, that there were 3 sons who went out. And you'll notice that the world then was known to have 3 parts. And the 3 parts were distinguished among the 3 sons. Noah himself was not included in that. He was just a progenitor to bring them into this world and then to direct them according to the will of the Most High. But the sons now became the 3 parts. Read on.
So that the whole continent was filled with them.
With who?
Filled with
So
them.
the whole continent, the 3 parts of the earth were filled with black people.
Come.
Read.
Both the inland and the maritime countries.
Say that again.
Salaki, both the inland
Inland meaning of the interior. Go on.
and maritime countries.
And maritime countries are countries that are closest to the sea. Go on.
There were some also who passed over the sea in ships.
Passed over, meaning then that they went to other sections or they resided, some of his people went and resided on islands and took up those islands. Go on.
And inhabited the islands.
There it is. Go on.
And some of those nations do still remain in the dominations come. Dominations which were given them by their first founders.
Right, because that word comes from the word domicile, meaning to take root and to occupy. So, go on.
But some have lost them also, and some have only omitted certain changes in them,
Go on.
that they might be the more intelligible to the inhabitants.
To the who?
To the inhabitants,
Keep reading.
and they were the Greeks.
Who were they?
And they were the Greeks.
They were the Greeks. Now, let's look even further. Let's read on.
Who became the authors of such mutations.
So notice it says the Greeks became the authors of such mutations.
Right.
Meaning, the Greeks were the ones that went into the different countries and assumed the identity of the people or made the people of those countries become a part of them. Now we can prove that, by the way, but let's finish that whole section.
Come. For when in after ages they grew potent, and they claimed to themselves the glory of antiquity.
They did what?
Salaki, and claimed to themselves the glory of antiquity.
They claimed to themselves the glory of what?
Antiquity.
Antiquity. Why is that so important? First of all, what they're trying to say, the glory or the power of the past, meaning the Greeks didn't come from anywhere. What they're trying to say, they were always there.
Come.
Hogwash. You don't go and take a country over and assume their identity and say that, well, we were always there. No. They went in and took the identity of the people that were there and closed the history books on them and made the history about themselves.
Come.
Read that last part again, sir.
Yes, sir.
About changing.
They claimed to themselves the glory of antiquity,
Go on.
giving names to the nations that sounded well in Greek, that they might be better understood among themselves,
Go on.
and setting agreeable forms of government.
Hold it. The agreeable forms of government, meaning they set up laws that no one could mention anything about the people who used to be here.
Come.
You do that, you die.
That's right.
We're the ones that are here now, and we're the ones that have always been here.
Come.
That's what that's about. But we'll prove that as well. Go on.
And setting agreeable forms of government over them,
Go on.
as if they were a people derived from themselves.
See? How can you be a people who derive from yourself? Everybody comes from someone. You see? So when we go now to 2 Maccabees chapter 6, begin at verse 1. Then we're going to pull excerpts. So begin at chapter 6, verse 1, 2 Maccabees.
Come. 2 Maccabees chapter 6 and verse 1.
Read.
Not long after this, the king sent an old man of Athens to compel the Jews to depart from the laws of their fathers.
See, get them to forget about your past and to take on our ways. Go on.
And not to live after the laws of God.
See that? So it's telling you that they were forced to leave the law, statute, and commandment that was given to them, handed down, first of all, going all the way back to Genesis, as a verbal law and becoming a written law later on with Moses. But go on.
Verse 2.
Jump to 3.
Verse 3. The coming in of this mischief
Go on.
was sore and grievous to the people.
Go on.
For the temple was filled with rioting and reveling by the Gentiles,
Go on.
who dallied with harlots and had to do with the women within the circuit of the holy place.
Read.
And besides that, brought in things that were not lawful.
Not lawful, meaning that they would have sex and they were in the temple and they would bring in swines for sacrifice in the temple. Jump to verse 6.
Verse 6. Neither was it lawful for a man to keep Sabbath days or ancient feasts, or to profess himself at all to be a Jew.
So you see, they took away your religious rights, they took away your feast and your Sabbath, and they took away the fact that you could not call yourself any longer a Jew. See that? But they forced them now that they would convene in the things that they wanted you to do. In fact, jump to verse 8 for time purposes.
Verse 8. Moreover, there went out a decree to the neighbor cities
Go
of the heathen
Read.
by the suggestion of Ptolemy
Read.
against the Jews,
Read.
that they should observe the same fashions and be partakers of their sacrifice.
And be partakers now of this abomination nation and take part of their religious rites, leaving our own and following theirs.
That's right.
See that? That's heavy right there.
That's right.
Watch this. Let's read verse 9, then we'll get back to
Verse 9. And whoso would not conform themselves to the manners of the Gentiles should be put to death.
Should be what?
Should be put to death.
Go on.
Then might a man have seen the present misery.
The present misery. Now, let's look at some things. First of all, we need to understand a couple of things, and let's see if we can get the slate correct. This is too short of a teaching to really do, and as I would like to do, a really in-depth teaching. We're going to go back to that. So, okay. Thank you, sir. So we have to really just do a cursory or an abridged version. So when we look, and I'm going to give you some verbal history just for time purposes. When we look at what took place, we have the Greeks who became the Romans, but they started up as something else, even the Greeks. But going back into the history, we find that even the peninsula that today is called Italy, it was actually run by black people.
Right.
Now, make a note of this, please. They were called the Etruscans. Now, to spell it out for you, because it is a difficult word if you're not sure of it, it's Etruscan. All right? Now, the Etruscan civilization, they flourished in the central part of Italy for many, many years, between the dates of the 8th to the 3rd century BCE. For those of you that don't know what BCE means, it means before Common Era. Now, the culture was renowned in antiquity for its rich minerals, its resources, and all the major Mediterranean trading power that existed at that time. They were one of the central points of location. Much of its culture and even its history was either obliterated or assimilated into that by the conquerors who later came, who called themselves Romans. Now, here is the point that I want you to get. How is it that the Romans are from Rome, but they come in to conquer people who are in Rome? Remember what I said? That Kittim, they began life in Cyprus, on an island called Cyprus. And there's a whole lot of story going on behind that as well. We don't have the time to cover it. We're just doing a cursory version. But they went and they invaded the Etruscans, and what they then did, they took their culture, took their history, and assumed their identity. That's why when you Google and you're trying to find out as much information as possible, it's difficult to find a whole lot of information about the Etruscans. Why? Because what happened was they controlled the narrative of the history to such a degree that they said, up to this point, we can talk about, but you will not find anything else after that point. Part of the reason is because the historians did not want the general public, because they knew how the future would be, they did not want the general public to know that the Etruscans were in fact black people, men and women of color. Now, when I say black people, I'm not saying brown, black people. Black, like me. That's what I'm talking about. Because, see, one thing I've noticed about the historians, they always like to say, oh, well, they were kind of a shade of this or a shade of that. Because they're too afraid to give proper rights and props to those people who probably existed. Now, make a note of this, because we still need to cover a little bit more here. The Etruscans, members of the ancient people they were called the Athenians. And I've heard that before because that's in Pitch Black. Because they use that term. And they were what we call today Italians, by today's standards. And they existed between an area that was called Tiber and Arnon. Tiber, Tiber, and Arnon, Arno. These were rivers. They existed between those. We covered a great deal of plains. Now, this particular river ran north and south, yes, I beg your pardon, not north, west and south of the Apennines. These were mountains. These civilizations reached the height of their success and their power in the 6th century BCE. Many features of the Etruscan culture were adopted by the Romans, who became eventually their successors, and took power and majored it through the entire peninsula of the country today we call Italy. Remember, Italy today is a united union. Before, they were all individual countries. Like you could be a Florentine from Florence, or you could be someone who was from Napoli, so you were Napoleonian. But you are different types of people. You are from Rome, then you are Roman. That's how it went. But they developed a united front where all of the different counties or countries, as they called it back then, or states, became one. Now that we understand it, let's go back to Josie first for a quick minute. Now, I'll take any questions. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask those questions at this time. If you have any, feel free. If we have any questions online, feel free to ask those questions as well. All right. Now we're going to read chapter 6.
Chapter 6. How every nation was denominated from their first inhabitants.
Hold it. Read it again.
How every nation was denominated from their first inhabitants.
Go on.
Now they were the grandchildren of Noah, in honor of whom names were imposed on the nations by those that first seized upon them.
Go on.
Japheth, the son of Noah,
Listen carefully.
had 7 sons. They inhabited so that beginning at the mountain Taurus and Amanus, they proceeded along Asia as far as the river Tamus.
So, Asia that is speaking about is not the Asia you know of today. The Asia it's speaking about is the Asia of the scriptures, which is called Asia Minor. Continue, sir.
Come, and along Europe to Cadiz.
Hold it. Now, we mustn't forget, he just mentioned Europe.
Come,
So then, the first people of Europe look like you and I.
come,
The people of Britain, today they call it Britannia, Russia, and Italy, France, and even what we call Germany. These were all people of color.
come.
Hello, somebody. Read on.
And setting themselves on the land which they light upon, which none had inhabited before, they
Hold it.
called.
Letting you know, and remember, we're getting this as a factual statement from a historian of his day, said that no one inhabited these lands first, but people that were of color.
Come,
Are you seeing this? I mean, if they were teaching this in schools, can you imagine how it would have affected the minds of our children?
come,
That they would never see themselves as being the lesser. They see themselves as being great
that's right.
and formidable. Read on.
Come, which none had inhabited before.
Go on.
They called the nations by their own names. For Gomer founded those whom the Greeks now call
You
Galatians.
see, the Greeks called Gomer what?
Galatians,
The Galatians
Gauls,
were who? He just said it. Read it again, sir.
Gomer founded those whom the Greeks now call Galatians.
Go on.
Gauls,
Go on.
but were then called Gomerites.
Go on.
Magog founded those that from him were named Gagogites, but who are by the Greeks called Scythians.
All right, so hold it. Who are the ones that in the scriptures are called Scythians? Who were those? Can anyone take a guess? Because if you don't know, you'll have to guess. So who among you will just give me a guess? I dare you. Yes, go ahead, please.
The Greeks.
You're about maybe 4,000 nautical miles away from them. But go ahead. Anyone else? Anyone else? Anyone else? Just a guess. Just a guess. Guess is not going to hurt you. I'm not going to say you're wrong, but just a guess. Yes.
The Phoenicians?
Venetians. The Phoenicians. That's more North Africa. So again, you're more south. We got to head north. So think northern, and then let's go from there. So, doctor, give me a guess. Just say a country. You know the countries that are on the 7 list that we named, right? So give me one of those then. You are absolutely right. See that? Germany. The Silesians are German.
Come.
Go ahead, sir.
It says now, as to Javan and Madai, the sons of Japheth, from Madai came the Madians, who are called Medes.
Right, so the Madians, they are called the Medes. Now the Medes, by the way, in fact, just read on a little bit more.
Come. Who are called the Medes by the Greeks. But from Javan,
All right, so let's cover that. So the Medes now, by today's standard, are what they would be the Samoans. They would be they are Polynesian. So those who are from Hawaii. There are those who are also called Tahitians. So Tahitians, Samoans, Polynesians, we have the Filipinos, we have Guam. In fact, you should make a note of them. Let me slow it down so that you have a note of them, because this will help you to understand the history when we speak about the Medes. That's why when you see many of those films, when some of those kings who are over many of that section of the world, and they send messengers and said, because I'm king over all of you, I want you to bring your ships. When they came like a mighty army because they were coming from all over the place. So we're dealing with Samoans, Tahitians, and we're talking about the Philippines, the Filipinos, the Guam, and we're also speaking about what's called the Austronese. Yes, it's Austronese. Yes. Austronesian. Austronesian, that's what I want to say. Austronesian. All right. Anyone want to spell it? Want to try?
A-S-T-R-O-N-E.
Say it again.
A-S-T-R-O.
No, A-U-S.
A-U-S-T-R-O.
Go on.
N-E-S-I-N.
Correct. Very good. All right, so those are, and the Japanese, just like Japanese, but Jaban, these. Got it? The Japanese. So all those people, they are all what was called the Medes. Continue, sir.
Come. But from Javan, Ionia, and all the Grecians are derived.
Read that again because I think people missed it.
But from Javan, Ionia, and all the Grecians are derived.
So for you to double check that, you want to write the word Javan down, the Japanese, and double check it with the scriptures, and go back to Genesis chapter 10, work your way through. Then you will see that this is now how Esau comes around, through Javan. Javan is through whom? Because remember, Javan in the early days was in fact looking like us. But he mixed himself with another group of people, who was Esau. And Esau, as true to form, took their identity and then went on and continued to do the same with all the other people. They took the identity of the Greeks, because that's why when you look at Greek, what's the finding they call it when you dig it up? Archaeology. When you look up archaeology, because archaeology doesn't lie. It doesn't lie. It is what it is. And when they dug up much of the ancient Greek pots and vases, they found that they showed half of the vase had a face and the other half had a face. One side was brown and the other side was white. That's telling you that the beginning of the Grecians were black and later were taken over by those who were white, which is Esau, and that's how you now today see them. You can check all this, fact check it. This is no fairy tale. Khan? All right, finish that off for me, finish it down to that. How far have you got?
I've gotten down before the Tobel. I haven't read Tobel.
Okay, let's stop there. Now, I'm going to give you one last piece of information, and then we're going to close on this. I have to give you something. Let me give you this as something to work with. I'm going to expand on it on the Sabbath, but if you have it now, then we can put it in perspective later. Now, in terms of Esau as a nation, in terms of their migration, they originally came from what country? Go ahead. Before that. You are right, they were from that, but where were they from before? Because remember, they all started up on the same plane. Can you tell me?
They were in Mount Seir.
They were where?
Mount Seir.
Yes. Mount Seir. Mount Seir, where?
Canaan.
No.
No, not Canaan.
Where, all right, for those of you who study your history, what city was built out of rocks, mountain faces and so on, and it still exists to this very day? You go there, you go through some narrow rocks. They featured it in Raiders of the Lost Ark, but you got to wind your way through. But when you come into the open plain of it, all of the rock faces became a city. They hewed it out of the mountain rocks. Say again?
I can't call the name of it.
But you can
It's
see
like-
it.
Yes,
Right.
and it still exists.
Say again?
And it still exists.
It still exists to this very day. When you go there, it is quite an amazing sight because it takes you right back in history. And you'll see mountains, and they hewed out Romanesque type designs and columns and windows all out of this mountain, and that's a city all around you.
That's right.
Go ahead.
That's right.
Petra.
Come,
Very good.
come.
Petra. I thought you would have got it, but sister there took it from me. All right. Petra. So they began. So remember, Esau began at Petra,
That's right.
right? So you want to either make a mental or physical note of it, because these are things I'm going to come back up with, and on the Sabbath, I'm going to hammer you with it. So we have Petra. Their first migration from Petra was where to where? Can anyone tell me? Go ahead. No.
That is.
You keep coming about Mount Seir thing, and you'll get there eventually, but not just yet. What, after Petra, where did they go first? All right. I dropped the clue because I was talking about them. I said that they stole identities and so on. Make notes. Write it down. Write it down, ladies and gentlemen. You will not remember this. I guarantee you, because I'm going to call on all of you. Even Cap too, I'm going to call it in too. Right? So you've got to have it down. So, where were they? I just told you about them. I told you about them. I told you about the antiquity. I told you about archaeology. So who were the people that we're talking about?
The Greeks and the Romans.
The Greeks, yes. The Greeks. So, where did they go? What country was established as the Grecian headquarters in the beginning? Macedonia.
Come.
Macedonia. Macedonia. So they went from Petra to Macedonia. Con? And then after they, remember that was their first migration. After they left their lot. Their lot was Petra, but they left there, right? Then they went to the second lot was where?
Macedonia.
Remember, I gave you all the clues earlier. So they came from Petra, they took over Macedonia and became the Greeks. And after they took over the Greeks, where did they go next to go on?
What's now known as Italy?
Italy. And where in Italy?
You said where the Etruscans.
Yes, but what you read in the scriptures in Italy about their headquarters?
Rome.
Rome. So Rome. So they went from Petra to Macedonia to Rome. Khan?
Khan.
Now, who can tell me where did they go after Rome? Can anyone tell me that? You got to know that.
They went to our land.
Where?
They went to where we were, Jerusalem, and over that area.
No.
Not
The
initially.
thing, not just yet, but remember, think about the progression. What are you going to tell me?
Germany.
You're heading in the right direction, but give me another name for all of that area.
Asia Minor?
What's the, you just mentioned Germany. Where is Germany today? Go on. Europe. Brother. So they went from, and I keep repeating so you can catch it. They went from Petra to Macedonia, from Macedonia to Rome, from Rome to Europe. Now, where did they go after that? Because remember, when they went to Macedonia, Macedonia is considered to be Asia Minor. It's considered to be that area where we are from. Go on. Then they went back to it, went over to Rome, and from Rome, then they went into Europe, and from Europe, who were the Europeans who traveled across the waters after that? I know you know your history. I'm finishing on this because this is the last thing that I'm going to cover. So that's why I'm kind of stretching your mind a little bit.
So you said there was 3 parts of the world.
Correct. And how many parts have we spoken about already?
3. And
Good.
now were they moving into the Americas?
Good.
Mm-hmm.
So they went from
Europe.
Europe to
America.
America. Oh, really? Oh, yeah. That's convincing it to be the 4th part of the earth. And they assumed the identity of the people that was in America.
That's right.
But it's confusing because you said, but they also were over in Africa with us over there.
Right?
But to think of the sequence, I think of them being there before they came over here.
I know why maybe you get a little bit confused. Because most times when people think about, you've got to look at how the world was conquered. Remember, you got to think about how you think about Carthage. The Carthage, they covered all of the North African section going over into southern Spain. They didn't conquer and go all the way to what was called the interior of Africa. That was not to come until 70 AD. So everything happened along the coastal. That's why, remember earlier on, I said the Mediterranean fronts or the coastal fronts. That's to let you know that some occupied coastal front areas. And that's what many of us, we're not taught that many of those who conquered, they didn't go into the interior, because to go into the interior would mean that you have to leave your base and you're leaving food and water. So you keep it close to where your base is. You see? Because you're going to fight people on the interior that you have no way of knowing who they are, how strong they are, etc., etc., etc. And the Romans were good at finding out because they believed in spies. All right. So all of the Grecian area, the Macedonians, so Asia Minor, then into Italy, now taking us over into because remember, Italy is part of Europe. But Italy back then was considered to be still part of Asia Minor. See that? So Greece going all the way into Jerusalem, and those areas were, remember, where Jerusalem is close to the coastal front. Right? And the Phoenicians, they're in North Africa, close to the coastal front. And then all of that area, so when you look at that what you call that basin, Italy, Greece, Cyprus, Malta, going all around to Jerusalem, all the way around. All that's considered the Asia Minor, the minor part. That's an area. And then you're looking at going into Europe, of course. And after Europe is covered, then we're going further in. Okay, so then they went to the Americas. So tell me, in fact, I'll stop there. Talk about the rest of Saturday. So, any questions from anyone online? I don't want it to be as heavy as what I would do on Saturday. So let's keep it simple. Yes, ma'am.
We have the sons of power is Israel. And the
Say
sons
it again.
the sons of power is Israel.
The sons of power is Israel.
The sons of men. the
And
nations.
remember, that's a good point that you raised. Let me explain why. Because Israel wasn't in existence in the Genesis, in the beginning. But what were they called? What would we call them today? They were called Adamite, which is what? A type of what? Huh?
Type of Yahushua.
Yeah. Well, a type of what? What would we call? If something isn't quite out, what do they call the thing that you're looking at before the real things all come out? What do they call it?
Precursor.
A prototype.
That's right.
So it's prototype Israel.
Got it.
See? How do we know? Because remember, Jacob's name is called Power with God.
That's right.
Right?
Yes.
So Israel's name also has that. Well, from the scripture it says Israel, Exodus. So this is, you got it? Go ahead, sir.
Exodus chapter 4, verse 22. And thou shalt say unto Pharaoh, Thus saith Yahweh, Israel is my son.
Israel is what?
Israel is my son,
Israel is my son, go on.
even my firstborn.
Even my firstborn. Israel is my son, he's my firstborn. So as a firstborn, he is considered to be the son of power. But before Israel actually came into being, there were those who were before who were called prototype Israel, who were the Adamites. Adam and all of his people, all of his seed. God? Not the other nations, not the nations of men, not the nations of the wicked, not the sons of men, and not the sons of the wicked. God? All right, any other questions? Go ahead.
My question was about the sons of the wicked. Can we say that the sons of the wicked were Japheth and his lineage?
Can we say that the sons of the wicked were Japhet? Tell me why.
I just saw that Israel was the sons of power.
Yes,
The sons of men are the nations.
yeah.
And when I think about the wicked, I think about the serpent. I think about Amalek, and that's his bloodline.
Okay. It's a good question. Now let's prove that. Did you have a question? All right. Go back to Genesis real quick. Go back to Genesis. What scripture did we open up in Genesis? Can anyone tell me?
16 and 11.
Go ahead.
5 and 32.
Go ahead and read it.
Genesis chapter 5, verse 32. And Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth.
All right. Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now, the sons of the serpent, what we're talking about, right? Okay. They come, or they primarily hail from, not from Japheth, from Ham. Not from Shem. Shem is the holy line. But remember the archetype. In the beginning, there were 3 types of sons. Those 3 types of sons was emulated again in the sons of Noah. See? So the same way that you could turn around and say, okay, Noah has 3 sons. In the beginning, there were 3 sons, and the 3 sons sons of the wicked, sons of nations, and sons of God. So then, how would that translate to Noah's sons? You have to look at it like this. In Noah's sons, you have the oldest, which is the firstborn, which is Shem. He hails as the sons of the power. Then you have who next? Who do you have next? Who do you have next? I don't guess it. I need you to be absolutely right. Read out what you just read just a moment ago.
Genesis chapter 5, verse 32. And Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth.
And Japhet. So Ham is the middle son, right? Need you to know it for a fact. You'll also confirm that in Genesis chapter 10, verse 1.
Genesis chapter 10 and verse 1. Now these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth.
Go
Unto them were sons born after the flood.
on after the flood. So Ham is the hot nations, what today we call it Africa. So we have Africa and Africa now, and there's a whole lot in that name that we've not gone into, but we will at some given point in the future. He now personifies the sons of the wicked, the sons of the serpent. Go ahead.
Also, Esau, he took on a Hamite wife.
Correct.
And so, did they go further into Africa and get more of those individuals there?
Well, remember, back in those days, the Ham was not yet fully in Africa. Ham owned Canaan. And remember, the Lord said to Moses and his men to drive them out. You see? And when they drove them out, where did they push them? Into Africa, as we know it today. So they drove them more into that section of the world. Because they were meant to have all of that section, which is considered to be the Fertile Crescent. All right. So anything else? Any other questions? Any other questions?
Grace and peace.
Grace and
I
peace.
was thinking like the Prince of Tyrus in Ezekiel 28. He's the descendant of Ham, isn't he?
He is the descendant of Ham.
So then that he was like the prototype back in.
He's the prototype. That's why he when you read it, the assumption is that this is the devil. But it isn't. You know, the Prince of Tyre is not the devil. It is a real person he's speaking about. See? Because if you study the history of Tyre, they were a very rich but proud nation. They got up acting like they didn't need anyone, but the Most High showed them. How did the Most High whip them? The Most High sent Alexander the Greek in there, and Alexander the Greek beat their behind and wiped them out. So history is a very important part of studying the scriptures. We were taught, when I was a child, they taught us that you don't need history. Hogwash, because the book, the scriptures, the whole Tanakh, it's a book of history. You need to know the history behind it. Otherwise, that's why many in the so-called Christian church, they have no understanding of Old Testament and so-called New Testament survey. They don't understand how the times were happening and what was happening at that time, etc., etc., etc. All right. Any other points before we close? One more time. Yes.
When you spoke of the leaves, and I thought about all those different Samoan, Polynesian, Tahitian, Philippines, Guam, and so forth.
Yeah.
And they all have decoy features.
All of them.
I didn't know who the Austronesians, who were they?
The Austronesians are all the people from that region. All the people. Because remember, when you look into Solomon Island, all of those, I mean, Madagascar, all of these are people that hail from, that they are they're people of color. The only reasons why they look a little different today is in terms of they look Caucasian-ish, is because many of them were destroyed by the Spaniards. Because those who are in the Philippines, the island of Philippines, or the country of Philippines, is called Philippines, named after King Philip, who conquered it and gave it his name. But that's not the original name, Philippines now. But the scriptures, through the scriptures and through history, you can find out who and what they really were called and are.
Did you say that, you said that they were Leeds, so are they?
They're
Shem?
all called Medes.
So they were from Shem?
Uh,
I'm trying to get correct.
right, so yeah, that's okay. All of those are to deal with, not Shem, but to deal with, not Ham, because Ham is hot. When you say Ham, let's always think hot, think Africa. Okay? Ham, hot. Dark face, people of burnt face. Ham,
Are you saying they're Japheth?
Yaphat.
But they got Negroid looking features around them.
Yeah, but I knew you were going to say that. That's why I kept on saying it, because I wanted to see where you were going. It's because you're still thinking of Yaphat as being white. He's not white. Yaphat is as black as me. Because remember, they're all Noah's sons. They're all Noah's sons were black men. It's the reason why sometimes we fight this information a little bit, not purposefully, but we've been so well indoctrinated into the thinking that Noah was a white man, all his sons were white men. But none of them were white. Not one of them. And that's why there are certain apocryphal books, like that they've completely destroyed the Book of Enoch. Because the original Book of Enoch is not the Book of Enoch we read today. The original Jubilee is not the Jubilee we read today. See? Because they have changed it because they needed to change the narrative to suit their history. Remember we read it from Josephus' mouth himself. He said how they make themselves to be those who are distinctive of antiquity. A people unto themselves. That's impossible. Because we all come from somewhere. And you can tell me that his line was so clear all the way through to where he got to, that he's the most unique nation on the planet. No, he isn't. Go on. Does that make sense? You sure?
Yes,
Need a little bit more?
yes, I'm just.
You still try taking it. I get you. Okay. Let it wash over you a little. Let it wash over. All right. Anything else before we conclude here? Well, to the people online, I know kept you over. I'm sorry to keep you over the time, but I hope that this has been instrumental and informative to you. I pray that you continue to tune in each week. Please do subscribe. Please get your friends to subscribe, like us, and keep on referring us to others. And we look forward to seeing you again on the Sabbath. On behalf of Captain and myself, we want to say, Barakatah Yahweh.
I will Hashem Mashiach Yahushua.
God.